A long time ago I never would have thought I'd be here in the year 2007, partly because I don't have a very good imagination but mostly because people don't live for 200 years. I was born Nathaniel Werner. The details of my life are long forgotten now, all except the defining moment when I became the hero I am today. I was an archaeologist on a dig in England when I was in my early 30s. We found a suit of armor in a tomb that we'd discovered. I remember sitting around with my team discussing the magnitude of our discovery when we were attacked. The men that ambushed us all wore cloaks. I watched as they killed my colleagues in front of me, knocking me unconscious afterward. When I awoke I was wearing the armor that we'd found. I still recall the stale smell of rot inside of it to this day. Around me my attackers were performing a ritual of some sort. I watched in horror as they spilled the blood of my teammates into a large cauldron. After a great deal of chanting and a dark energy surrounding me, the men cut my bonds and let me go. They told me that the armor that my soul was now bound to would make me invincible and give me eternal life, but I would forever feel the pain of everyone I came into contact with. The only out I was offered was to remove the armor, thereby killing me. I murdered every last one of them, my insane screaming drowning out all of their cries. I never even considered removing the armor. I knew that despite the way I'd come to be this way, I was meant to use the power the armor gave me to protect people, to keep them from suffering. I keep myself from feeling their pain. Now as I enter the final chapter of this life, I can't help but wonder if maybe I should have given up before I started. Knight and Ataris entered the ship and made their way to the vast below-deck area. They began to grow concerned with the lack of security on the cargo ship where statesman of the Freedom Phalanx was being held. I believe that we may have the wrong ship, Ataris said as they made their way into the large cargo hold that was lined with giant steel containers, making it look remarkably like a normal cargo ship. This is the boat that Keyword told us about, Knight said. Suddenly several large searchlights came on and focused in on the two heroes. You are indeed on the right ship, a man's voice said from the scaffold high above them. Unfortunately statesman isn't here, the man said. A small army of Malta soldiers filed out of the large steel containers and surrounded Knight and Ataris. After 200 years in that armor, you must be pretty tired of it, the man on the scaffold said as he made his way down the stairs to meet Knight face to face. The man looked like a cowboy. He wore a black leather duster and black cowboy hat. His face was covered by a black handkerchief and he had two large pistols holstered on his hips. Actually, it's kind of grown on me, Knight said. The man nodded. I'll bet it has. Unfortunately, Malta has quite an interest in it, which means we'll have to take it from you, the man said. Knight shook his head and teleported out of the crowd of guards and up to the scaffold above. Flinging soldiers left and right off of the scaffold and to the ground far below, bullets ricocheting off his iron hide, Knight fought for everything he was worth. Ataris phased his body out of the soldier's grasp and started to head up to Knight when an electrical blast hit him and sent him to the ground. Sorry Ataris, but these cookie weapons of ours seem to be able to hit you even when you're intangible, the man said. Now, surrender to us, Knight, or I kill your friend, the man said as he put his pistol to Ataris' head. Knight teleported down to the man with his arms above his head. Don't hurt him, he said. Good boy, the man said before punching Knight in the chest, sending him flying across the room into one of the steel containers. Knight came to and found himself strapped into a large machine. What's going on? He asked the cowboy. Like I said, Malta is very interested in your armor, so we're going to take it, the cowboy said. The bad news is that you'll die in the process, he added. Who are you? Knight asked. You may call me Omega Black. I'm the leader of Malta's Gunslinger project, the man explained. Knight looked across the room to see Ataris chained to a wall guarded by two soldiers. Knight turned his attention back to Omega Black when the machine began to power up. I'd like to tell you that this will be painless, but I don't want to lie to you, Omega Black said. The machine began to spark electricity onto Knight, and soon he was acting as a lightning rod for the machine. His screams of pain echoed throughout the ship as the machine worked to rip the armor from him. Ataris watched his teammate being tortured and gritted his teeth. I can't let Knight suffer like this, he thought to himself as he phased out of his chains and ran to Knight. The soldiers that were guarding Ataris fired at him and sent him to the ground again. As they moved in to retrieve him, he got back up and leapt at them. Ataris grabbed the men by the neck and dropped them to the ground before snapping their necks. He turned and ran to the machine again, electrical blasts grazing past him. Knight watched Ataris leap into the path of the electricity coming from the machine, blocking the current from hitting him. Omega Black looked on as the electricity turned Ataris intangible and went through him and into Knight. He saw Knight's armor glow bright white before it suddenly exploded, shards of shrapnel spraying the room and ripping through everything in its path. Surveying the damage that the explosion had caused, Omega Black saw an armorless Knight laying in the mangled remains of the machine he'd been strapped into. With a sigh, he started to leave the room. "I want everyone off the ship in 5 minutes, and I want the ship blown up in 6, he said into his walkie-talkie. Ataris phased through a nearby wall and made his way to Knight's motionless body. The large Jamaican dropped to his knees near his fallen teammate and shed a tear for his friend. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Knight," Ataris choked out amidst his sobs. As he willed himself to become tangible again, he realized that he couldn't. He growled in anger as he realized that the machine must have altered him somehow and caused him to be unable to change back. Knight coughed and stirred slightly. "What happened?" he groaned. "Knight, you're alive," Ataris exclaimed and moved to get the debris off of his friend but realized he couldn't. "Of course I am. It'll take a lot more than a little explosion to take me out," Knight said as he pulled himself out of the twisted metal that was the machine. "But your armor is gone," Ataris said as he watched his naked teammate rise to his feet. Knight looked down at his naked form and covered himself up. "I don't understand, I should be dead," he said. Ataris nodded and got to his feet. "We need to get out of here, the others may be in danger," he said. Knight nodded. "Why are you still intangible?" he asked as he rummaged through a locker for some clothes. Ataris shrugged. "I can't change back, something happened when I jumped into the machine," he explained. Knight looked solemnly at Ataris after dressing in some work clothes he'd found. "Thank you for saving me, old friend, I'll do everything I can to help you get back to normal," he said. Ataris nodded. "I'll meet you at the base," he said and phased through the wall of the ship. Knight made his way to the top deck, stopping and waiting as the remaining Malta soldiers departed after setting the explosives needed to destroy the ship. When he was sure they were all gone, Knight exited the ship and teleported back up to the bridge just before the ship exploded and sank into the bay. With a sigh, Knight teleported himself to the entrance of the base. "Knight and Ataris are taken care of, sir. I just got the report from Omega Black," Keyword said into the phone. "Was the armor recovered?" the man in the office asked. "No, sir, the armor was destroyed as was the ship and both heroes," Keyword said. The man in the office sighed. "This is not good news, Thomas," he said. "Yes, sir, I apologize for the incompetence of Omega Black," Keyword said. "I want you to maintain your post and keep me up to date with where the operation stands hourly," the man in the office said. "Yes, sir, I won't fail you," Keyword said with a nod as he hung up the phone. "So, this was your doing?" Knight asked as he entered the room after listening to the conversation Keyword was having. Keyword spun around in surprise and pulled a pistol from the back of his pants, pointing it at Knight for a second before firing. Knight teleported out of the path of the bullets and next to Keyword, where he gave him a solid right hook that knocked the man to the ground. "Who are you?" Knight asked. The man said nothing and received a kick to the stomach from Knight. "Tell me who you are before choke the life out of you," Knight warned. The man looked Knight in the eyes, seeing if he could find truth in his words. "I'm a spy for Malta," he said finally. "I gathered. What's your mission?" Knight asked. "I was told to feed you false information to send you on suicide missions," the man explained. "Are you really Keyword?" Knight asked. The man shook his head. "The real Keyword is still in Malta custody at a secret facility," the man explained. Knight nodded his head in understanding and offered the man his hand to help him up. The man took Knight's hand and groaned as he stood up slowly. Knight grabbed the man by the throat and lifted him in the air. "If any of my people die today, I will not hesitate to make your demise extremely painful and slow," Knight said before tossing the man across the room and sending him smashing through a nearby wall. Knight sat in front of the computer that monitored his team's vital signs. He looked solemnly at the flat-line readings of arson and diapered dandy and clenched his fist tightly as he got up to retrieve the Malta spy. Ataris phased through the entrance of City Hall and made his way back to Azuria's office. Entering the room, he saw the Jamaican sorceress seated at her desk poring over a large book. "Welcome, Ataris. Gotten yourself into some trouble?" Azuria asked without looking up from her book. "Yes, Azuria. I can't turn off my intangibility," Ataris explained. "I know, but rest assured I am already working on a way to remedy the situation," she said as she got up and went to the intangible hero. "How did you know already?" he asked. "My boy, you forget how wise your grandmother is and that she gave you your power," Azuria said with a smile. Ataris nodded. "You probably already know, but Dementia's knight's armor was destroyed in a Malta ambush," Ataris said. "I do know that, and still he lives. I'm very curious about the whole thing," Azuria said. "When this is all over I'd like for him to come see me," she added. "If we're still alive I'm sure he'll be right over," Ataris said. With a nod, Azuria returned to her seat and book and continued to look for a remedy for her grandson. Half-Life Hannah and Winter Flare hovered above the large warehouse in the Orion Beltway district of Galaxy City. The pair flew to the roof and set down gently. "I have a bad feeling about this, sis," Elisa said. Hannah put an arm around her younger sibling. "I'm not thrilled about it either, kiddo," she said with a smile. Hannah removed her arm and pulled out the map of the building. "Okay, according to this, if we enter from the south, we should be far enough away from any patrols to get the drop on whatever is in there," she said. Elisa nodded and followed Hannah off the roof and down to the south entrance door. The pair took a deep breath and entered the building as quietly as possible. The warehouse smelled of industrial equipment and sweat. The odor assaulted the sisters' nostrils as they made their way inside from the fresh air of the street. "This place stinks," Elisa whispered as she pinched her nose closed. Hannah turned and smiled at her and made a motion for her sister to be quiet as they came to another door. "Open the door slowly and I'll head in first," she directed. Elisa nodded and grabbed the handle of the door. With a low creak the door opened slowly, allowing Hannah to enter the room beyond. Elisa peeked around the corner and followed behind her sister. "I don't think this is the right place," Hannah whispered. Elisa nodded. "It seems like this place should be crawling with Malta if this is where they're keeping Back Alley Brawler," she said. Suddenly heavy footfalls sounded from the roof as several dozen Malta soldiers dropped down from several helicopters above. "Guess we were just early," Hannah said. The skylights on the roof exploded as soldiers dropped in on rappelling wires, guns blazing as they spotted Hannah and Elisa. The two sisters split apart and flew to opposite ends of the warehouse, bullets whizzing past them as they flew for cover. Hannah blasted several of the soldiers before they could disconnect from their wires and flew through the open skylight where they'd dropped in to take out the choppers above the warehouse. Elisa created a wall of thick ice to deflect the bullets that came at her and launched several waves of icicles at the soldiers when they stopped firing to reload. Hannah fired a warning shot at each of the helicopters and smiled as they turned and flew off. Her victory was short-lived, however, as a Titan robot slammed down on her from above. The emerald-haired heroine smashed through the metal roof of the warehouse and crushed the concrete floor with the force of her landing. "Hannah!" Elisa shouted as she saw her sister fall and have a robot land near her preparing to attack. Acting on impulse, Elisa flew out from behind her ice shield and went to her sister. A hail of bullets whizzed by her as she propelled herself toward Hannah. Reaching her sister, she encased her body in ice and created a large sword from her icy form. "Back off, bub!" Elisa screamed as she slashed at the robot with her ice sword, ripping the robot's chest plate open. The robot staggered backward momentarily from the blow, but recovered quickly. With a blast of its wrist cannon, it knocked Elisa backward into several soldiers and a wall beyond. As the robot moved to attack Elisa again, it was disintegrated by a radiation blast from Hannah. "Nobody hurts my baby sister," Hannah said as she dusted herself off and flew to Elisa's aid. The remaining soldiers began fleeing when they saw the Titan robot destroyed so easily. "Looks like we won," Hannah said. Elisa let her icy form melt away, revealing a smiling face. "Good, that ice armor makes me tired," she said. As the two sisters made their way to the exit, several more Titan robots appeared on the roof. One dropped down and smashed its metallic fists into each woman's head, sending both sprawling to the floor. The robot moved to Elisa and stomped down on her midsection with its large foot. Elisa howled in pain and tried to attack the robot, but found she was far too weak to muster any kind of effective offense. Hannah blasted the robot's head off with a large radiation blast and moved to her sister's side. "Elisa, talk to me, babe." Hannah cried out as she looked at her sister's badly injured body. "I'm cold." Elisa managed to choke out in a blood-soaked cough. Tears rolled down Hannah's cheeks as she scooped her sister up into her arms and rocked her gently. "It's okay, baby. I'm here for you," Hannah said in a hoarse whisper as she fought to get her words past the aching lump in her throat. "I'm sorry I wasn't a good hero like you," Elisa muttered as her consciousness began to slip away. Hannah was now in hysterics as her sorrow took hold. "You were the best hero, sweetheart," she said, her tears dripping down onto Elisa's tattered uniform. The robots from the roof dropped down and advanced on Hannah and Elisa. "Target identified, begin termination sequence for Half-Life Hannah," one of the robots said. Hannah's tear dried instantly as white-hot radiation began to emanate from her eyes, and she lay her sister's lifeless body back down on the ground and rose to meet her attackers. "You killed my sister," Hannah said as her body began to glow brightly with great radioactive energy. The robots fired their weapons at Hannah, and each blast was absorbed into her already supercharged body. Hannah merely flexed her power slightly and shattered the robots instantly. Hannah powered down and dropped to her knees and wept. "I'm so sorry, Elisa," she cried as she picked up her sister's body and flew through the open roof of the warehouse and back to the base. "Speaking as a person that deals with ice for a living, I have to say that everything gets really cold when you're dying. I guess I always thought that it was just something that the movies did for dramatic effect, but it actually happens. It's funny, I never thought that I'd die so young. I always thought that Hannah and I would grow old together and talk about each of our families as we knitted in our rocking chairs. Then again, I never thought that I'd be crushed by a giant robot while trying to save the life of a superhero. I really don't think it's fair that I'm dying, but I'm glad it's me instead of Hannah. I don't know what I'd do if I had to watch her die. I just wish that I could feel her holding me close to her. I wish that I could feel the warmth of her body or smell her perfume. Unfortunately, all of that's lost to me now. All I feel is cold, and all I see is a foreboding darkness creeping up on me. Now would probably be a good time to say that I love you, Hannah. Too bad my voice is gone. I have a feeling that you know anyway, so it's okay if I don't say it. I thank you for all that you've done for me over the years, big sister. I'll miss you.